to someone. So, and it was new to me, obviously, at one point. So, I'd
Mm,
rather be prepared than not.
mm.
But all right. Well, I guess we can get the conversation going. I'll intro us up.
All right.
All right. Hey guys, welcome to the 11th episode of Let's Talk Comics, where myself and another co-host in the comics community discuss one of the many facets of the storytelling medium that is comics. Whether it be stories, creators, constructs, we pretty much hit it all. This week we have a really special guest host with us in honor of Hawkman Day tomorrow. Hawkworld himself, Mr. Tim Board. How you doing, my friend? It's good to have you on.
Hey, Trevor. Thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure. Do you want to let the people of the internet know where to find you, what you're all about?
Sure. My name's Tim Board, and I run several social media sites for Hawkworld. You can find us on Facebook and also Twitter, Hawkworld _. We're also on Instagram, and I also have a Hawkworld blog. So there's 4 places you can find us.
Yeah. And for those of you that weren't aware, we do have the links to both his blog and his Twitter in the description below. So make sure you go check him out. He's always posting some really cool Hawkman stuff multiple times a day. Whether or not you're a new fan or an old fan, there's always something to appreciate. But
Well, thanks.
no, of course. But this week, like I said, we're going to be, or like you guys might have seen in the thumbnail, we're going to be chatting the current Hawkman run by Robert Venditti and Bryan Hitch. I felt like this was a great topic. We did have something originally in store, but I didn't feel like I was going to be able to make it as quality as possible with the time that I had on my hands. But I think this is a great substitution. And as always, you guys know we start off every episode with our pull of the weeks. We just let you guys know a book that came out this week that we've either read or we're excited to read that we'll talk about briefly. So, Tim, since you're the guest, did you want to start off with your pull of the week?
Oh, well, man, the big news this week has been Green Lantern.
Mm-hmm.
I've been waiting for that one for quite a while. And I finally got to read it online. Was it yesterday? And yeah, it was very interesting take on on Hal Jordan. So I'm looking forward to continuing that series for a while.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's my pull of the week for this week as well. I actually really enjoyed it. I can see why like some returning Green Lantern fans might be, very up and down about it. But generally speaking, I think that it feels like Grant Morrison is just crafting more of that world that is like the Green Lantern sphere. You know what I mean? He feels like he's
Mm.
really blowing it up even farther.
Yeah, well, I'll never, decide on a comic with one issue. You want to see where the writer's going with it for a while. I'll admit it wasn't something I was expecting. Um, the Venditti run ended with him at, Carol Ferris's door.
Right.
Yeah, and then suddenly we're in a completely different situation. And I tweeted about this just a while ago, but it kind of felt like Green Lantern with a bit of the dreaming
Mm-hmm.
flavor to it. It was all the different new Green Lantern characters coming up, and just the way Liam Sharp draws his world of Green Lantern, just kind of made it very it kind of reminded me of the dreaming. It was very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what Morrison's doing right now in this Green Lantern book, or at least from this issue one, feels Grant Morrison. It's really inventive. He's kind of playing outside the lines a little bit. And I feel like with
Hmm.
something as massive and undertaking as a space epic, or or being in that sphere of space, I feel like there's so much you can do. For me, this issue felt a lot like Star Wars meets the Green Lantern. You know,
Mm.
it felt like there
Hmm.
was a lot more to it. Morrison in this issue, without giving away too many spoilers, also reintroduces a lot of really old Green Lanterns from the Silver Age and gives them a little
Hmm.
bit of a spotlight, makes them a little bit more 3-dimensional because obviously the style and the way in which comics are written now are far different than what they were 40, 50 years ago. So I found
Yeah.
it really, really interesting.
Yeah, well, Grant Morrison, he's always one who's come up with some very interesting ideas. Every time I hear his name, I remember what he wanted to do with Hawkman back in the late '90s. But and you don't want to see something that just the same old thing again.
Right.
That's one of the things I was looking forward to is something completely different, and he certainly is doing that. So it'll be interesting where he takes it.
Right. Yeah. And like as you said, like I'm a big fan of Venditti, and that's how I found him via Green Lantern. Um,
Mm,
but I had a little conversation with the artist Liam Sharp on Twitter, and he had said that the timing, like the time for this book is going to jump around a lot, but where
mm,
this first issue starts, he said, is sometime in the somewhat near future, um,
mm,
of the Venditti run. And I mean, I'm kind of fine with it. As much as I love the whole Hal Jordan Carol Ferris relationship, I've always
yeah.
seen Hal as the type of guy that really doesn't have the ability to commit very well to anything besides the Green Lantern Corps, and even to
Mm-hmm.
that extent, he won't follow their rules either. So I'm not really torn up about it personally, but that's just,
Mm-hmm.
again, that's my perception of Hal Jordan.
Yeah, well, with Hal Jordan, how many times have we seen, he's trying to hook up with Carol Ferris and then he's called away to another, Green Lantern emergency and she's left standing there alone.
Mhm.
So it just seems like, Carol Ferris and the Green Lantern is just not working out for Hal Jordan. He always has to pick one or the other. He's never able to do the two together, which is
Mhm.
unfortunate because I love seeing them together. They're a very interesting couple, and um, they got a long history. Uh, but it looks like she's not going to be in the picture for a while. Who knows? But
Mhm.
I was a little disappointed about that because the ending of the Venditti run it was a very nice ending
Right. Yeah.
with him at her door. But yeah, we're going to get something else now, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm overall really excited. I felt like the way he wrote Hal as a character was pretty on the nose. I thought it was solid, and I think one thing that's gone a little bit unmentioned is the artwork. I love the artwork in this issue, and I think that, and again, this is like what started my conversation with Liam Sharp, how
Mm,
the coloring feels very Silver Age. The coloring feels really
mm,
vintage, but it's
mm,
on top of like really modern pencils. And I think
mm,
it like gives this really cool aesthetic to the book that makes it
mm.
feel, again, both like some collaboration between modernity and the vintage. And I really love it. I think it looks great.
Yeah, one of the things I always look at is, the how much detail the artist works into, each panel. And Liam Sharp seems to have his own style, but just the detail that he goes into of just almost every panel is just amazing. And with his comics, I read through it real quick, see what the story is, and then I'll go back and just kind of just slowly just look through all the pictures again because he's just such an amazing artist.
Yeah.
He's got his own style. He's got his own style, and yeah, he posted a Hawkman on Twitter. I think it was last week, and he also did the Hawkman found cover, and he draws an awesome Hawkman as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm looking forward to his Green Lantern, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. And for those of you, just to get an idea, I don't know if my camera will pick it up very well. Let me move this light so it's not going to glare too badly. But like the amount of detail here, I think is spectacular.
Mm,
Um, and like I said, or one and another like cool thing before I go too far off onto the Green Lantern tangent, the way he lays out the panels and the pages, I think are really unique.
mm.
I've never seen like these types of panel layouts before.
Mm.
I don't know. I feel like it again adds on to the kind of like the space aesthetic, like futurism and so on and so forth.
Now that you said that, I've got to go back and read it again.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, check out the panels.
Yeah, the panel layout I thought was really interesting. I don't know, I felt like the craftsmanship here was great, and then when he kind of delved into the different like races and species of lanterns, like of course there's going to be more that we've never thought of or never seen. Like he said that like the viral Green Lantern, like that's freaking insane. I love that.
Yeah, that was wild. Yeah.
I was like, it makes so much sense because it's not, you know what I mean? Like these species are not ever going to be confined by like what we think they might be. So like the fact that Grant
Hmm.
Morrison is kind of like you'd never think it'd be a virus, or you'd never think it was a creature made out of microwaves. And for those
Hmm.
of you listening, not the appliance microwave, like the the light wave. But I don't know. I think this comic was really great. I'll be doing a review on it sometime soon. But unless you have any more to add about Green Lantern, we can get on into today's topic.
Yeah, let's move on. It's a great cop. I definitely recommend everybody to pick it up. It was a great book.
I'd agree 100%. So this week, like I said before, we're going to be talking about the current run of Hawkman. Fortunately for you, for those of you watching, if you haven't started picking it up yet, it's only on issue 5. So I feel like it's still going to be fairly accessible. And I think for me, coming in as a fairly new fan of Hawkman, I had never read a Hawkman story. I've read books with
Mm,
Hawkman in it, but I had
mm,
never read a Hawkman solo title before. And I,
mm.
going like being a comic book fan and being someone who does YouTube, you obviously, I went in and I did my research on the character before I started reading Hawkman around Metal, especially because he was pretty heavily involved there. And
Yeah.
the first thing you find out is, wow, this guy's history is really hard to like. It's convoluted. There's a lot to it, and if you haven't been following it as well as
Mm,
someone like you has, you're
mm,
gonna get lost. And for me, I feel like this book, does a great job at meshing, those old continuities and not disrespecting the old school fans and building something new with it and making it feel like one cohesive thing.
mm. But yeah, that's one of the things that Venditti has managed to do is keep the veteran fans in. He's throwing in, bits and pieces there that we recognize from a past story or a run or whatever. But he's also made a story that a new fan can just jump right in and find out what this character is all about, and he's done a masterful job with it, I think.
Yeah, and not to mention again the visuals. I think this is some of Brian Hitch's best work.
Well, to be honest, I read Brian Hitch's stuff before, and he it never really I mean, he's a great artist, but he never really stood out to me. But when he did Hawkman Found last year, it came out the end of December. It just blew me away. It's just the most beautiful Hawkman comic I've ever read, and we were just talking about detail just a while ago, but the detail that he puts into like the wings and the harness,
Mhm.
and it's not just one panel. He just does it panel after panel after panel, and it's just stunning work. And yeah, he's up there with one of my favorite artists now. He's doing an amazing job, especially those
Yeah.
2-page spreads. My gosh.
Oh man. I mean, I'm like kind of scrolling through the first issue right now, and it's literally the first page is like a one-page splash of Carter
Mm,
Hall flying towards the camera or like the perspective.
yeah.
And it's like just
Mm,
looking at this, like you were saying, there is no detail spared here.
mm,
It's incredible. And I've been reading Brian Hitch's stuff for a while, and this, and there are things that I've heard of that he did like regarding work in like the Wildstorm universe that I heard is like some of his greatest work that I haven't gotten to read yet. So, but like you, this book was the one that was like, wow, you know what
mm.
I mean? It,
Well, I was talking with Robert Venditti on another podcast once, and he was talking how Brian puts detail in everything, even like in the background, like the cover of issue number 2, where
Mhm.
it looks like he's in an Egyptian pyramid or something, and then like the hieroglyphics on the back and right behind him.
Yeah.
And Rob was saying, just probably Bryan has researched hieroglyphics, and you can probably read something from what he's putting behind Hawkman and everything. It's just the detail, yeah, it's just incredible.
And also too, one of the things that I usually like to discuss when talking about a comic book artist is how they direct a scene, because one of the things that people I don't think really give an artist credit for is the way that they pace the timing, what they choose to show, what they choose not to show, and how that
Mm,
overall contributes to the storytelling here. You know what I mean?
mm,
Like the way they panel it out, like I brought up the panel layout in Green Lantern earlier, but you open up, for example, to like the second page, I guess, of Hawkman #1, and you have like this large image, right? You can see where Carter is, and then he's kind of and it's like this big like rock formation in the middle of the ocean, and he's
mhm,
kind of there's like almost a chimney up top, uh and he makes his way through it, and each panel, like each sequential panel, is like pacing out like what he's doing as he's
mhm,
falling down, and then you get another large image of what's inside. And stuff
mhm,
like that I feel like is goes kind of unmentioned most of the time, the way they're directing it, right? Because they are the actors, they are the setting, they're the director, you know what I mean?
mhm. Well, in the first issue, we really didn't know what to expect, and then right away, and like you said, from the second page, it looks like his wings are getting smaller,
Mhm.
and then he goes through that like that hole or whatever, and his wings are gone, and then when he gets down to the bottom, boom, his wings are there again,
Mhm.
and you don't really know. I really didn't notice it at first. I didn't know what he did. I just uh, um, just I guess sometimes just overlook things like that. When you go back and then you realize, oh wait, his wings are retracting and going in, and then when he gets down there, they come back out again. And and he, like you said, through the panels, he shows that this is the ability that Hawkman now has,
Mhm.
and that was amazing.
Yeah, the way that they deliver, or more specifically, Bryan Hitch there delivers that information, I think is awesome. And like
Mm,
where they position certain things on the page, you know what I mean? Like
mm,
you're going down, and I think it's the third page, right? And this is very much like an Indiana Jones-esque adventure, and he's trying to
mhm,
retrieve this relic called the Nautilus of Revealment, and then
mm,
bottom huge image, huge monkey statue with a third eye coming after him. Like that was so
mhm,
well placed, because you know what I mean? Like
mhm,
you're kind of feeding into this. You see him reaching
mhm,
for the relic. He has the relic. Cool. He's gonna get out of there, right? It's gonna be easy.
mhm,
And then boom, big ape statue coming at him.
mhm,
Like I mean stuff like that, man. I think is, and again the like beautifully illustrated by Hitch. All the detail that goes into the stonework on the ape
mhm.
and behind the ape,
Oh
I think
yeah,
is awesome.
that it is. Even when the shrine is like breaking apart, and Hawkman's diving in the water and everything, he still Brian still gets all that detail on the rocks and on the stones and walls and everything, and it just makes it so much more real. It's beautiful to see.
Yeah, 100%. Do you feel, one question I have for you, I feel like especially the first two or three issues, the Hawkman series has very similar tones to like in Indiana Jones. Do you feel
Hmm.
like either A, those tones are consistent with him as a character, or B, do you feel like it's just kind of a welcome addition to who Hawkman is?
Well, one of the most surprising and welcoming things about this new series is Carter Hall. Up until now, Carter Hall's kind of taken a back seat to Hawkman, and really it's all about when he's wearing the wings and the helmet and the harness and everything. But Carter Hall's interactions with all these supporting characters, all these people that he knows all over the world, his like friendship network that he has, and talking about how he's not interested in money or making money. He's interested in discovering, exploring, and when he goes to the London Museum, the curator, immediately recognizes him, and he's got some amount of respect in that community and stuff like that. And Robert Venditti has written the character in a way that I'm just as interested in Carter Hall as I am in Hawkman now.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever happened before. I mean, I like the character. I mean, he's always been like a curator in a museum and an archaeologist and all this kind of stuff. And Jeff Johns, touched on that quite a bit back in his run. But I would be perfectly happy with just a Carter Hall book for a while.
Yeah.
That's how interesting the character is to me. I want to know more about him. Where is he? Where is his? Where is his base? And what does he do when he's not looking for stuff? And and he's got this amazing network of friends that he has in almost just everywhere. Indonesia and Greece and all these. And in London, all these places where people will, respect him and help him out when he needs help, and that's been one of the biggest surprises for me.
Yeah, and I think that as someone who's like a newer fan that has some limited background knowledge on the character going into it, I feel like it makes a lot of sense. Like it feels contextually appropriate because he's been reincarnating throughout the years, and quite a few of his past lives were on Earth. So you
Mm.
would almost come to expect, like, okay, he's met many people throughout his past lives, and they even kind of allude to that because what was it the first or the second issue he met someone and they were like, oh, for what you did for like my grandfather or my father or
Right.
something like that,
Mm-hmm.
like you're always welcome in my home or whatever, and I'm like, that makes so much sense. He's
Yeah.
been around for a long time. You think he'd have that network of people that he's met or explored with and or maybe even saved.
Well, that's one of the things I think Robert Venditti has touched on. Like Superman or Batman. Their other identity is a big part of their story.
Hmm.
Clark Kent, news reporter, and Bruce Wayne, billionaire, and half the time, half the stories is about them when they're out of costume. And so many times we think, well, what would make a Hawkman series work? Up until now, it's never reached number 50 for a character that's been around for 79 years. It's kind of hard to believe, but what's that? What is it that doesn't make or keeps Hawkman from working? And I think that was one of the things where Carter Hall kind of took a back seat to the hero. But I think what Robert Venditti has done is the same thing as like with Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne. Carter Hall has his own history and his own life and his own personality and character. And I think that's a big key to making a Hawkman series work.
Yeah. No, I mean, it feels like such a welcoming, like I said before, it feels both
Yes.
welcoming and like like it's predicated on so much history, which I think is
Mm,
awesome. Um,
mm,
and just Carter Hall just seems like a fun character. You know what I
mm,
mean? You go into it, or like when I went into this with what little background knowledge I had on Carter, I was like, again, it doesn't seem like it seems like Carter is just like you see in like crime dramas how like businesses will be fronts for like gang operation. Like Carter Hall very
mm,
much felt like a front for like the Hawkman operation. You know what I mean?
mm,
So like you said, it,
mm,
it feels really really cool that they're providing a little bit of depth to Carter Hall as a character.
mm,
But
mm,
also, that's not to be said that Hawkman isn't a huge part of this because he is. This entire book is about his reincarnations throughout space and time and him discovering, a little bit more about himself as an entity, which is
mm,
cool, Not only are there cool, like he fights almost every issue, it feels like he's fought like a great mythical beast. And like, so not only are we getting this great story and character progression, we're getting like fun, action filled, you know, almost cinematic moments in this run.
Mm, mm. Well, so far what he's been fighting a T-Rex. He's been fighting an army of uh, I don't know how you say it, Featherins.
Yeah, feelings. Yeah,
To top of the mountain. He's been fighting his own past lives, and there's a big chunk of the story where there's a lot of dialogue and stuff going on, but then there's half the comic. There's always a huge big action scene as well, and
agreed. Yeah.
um, yeah, he gives us both, which makes it a lot of fun.
Right. And I think thematically too, like Venditti is finding a great way to integrate so many different things without it feeling too packed. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if you
Mm,
read all of Dark Knight's Metal, but for me,
mm,
like it felt like there was so much in there that wasn't resolved, but
mm,
it felt jam packed. But like with
yeah.
this, there's a lot in here, and it all
Mm,
feels really organic. Because not only are
mm,
you getting just really fun, adventurous stories, you're getting these great thematics, right, about a man who is kind of trying to discover himself. You know what I mean? To the
mm,
most extreme degree, he's reincarnated throughout space and time, and he's done things that he doesn't remember. You
mm,
know, and it's
mm,
just kind of a man coming to grips with who he is and discovering how to take the past and to take who he is now and
mm,
inform who he should be for the future. So
mm,
I think thematically too, like it adds this level of high art to a book like this that
mm,
a lot of other authors would definitely neglect.
mm. Well, Hawkman unfortunately has this image of he's a confusing character. He's convoluted character. He's hard to understand, and just some things that you could get away with, like Superman or Batman or the Flash, you can't get away with Hawkman.
Mhm.
If you start writing a story that's really confusing, and you got to go back and read a whole series from 20 years ago, like you're studying for a midterm or something, then people aren't going to want to read it.
Mhm.
But Venditti has written, he gives us enough information to understand where he is now, but he keeps you wanting to come back and find out what the next piece is,
Yeah.
and uh, it's good to go back and read up and see what he's done in the past, but you don't need to with this series.
Yeah.
And you just start from number one, and it's only issue 5,
Mhm.
and Venditti is going to give us piece by piece, and so pretty soon we're going to get the puzzle and figure out what's going on. So he's made it a lot of fun without it being confusing.
I agree 100%. And I feel like there is a lot of fan service to people like you that have been following Hawkman for a long time. Like you were
Oh
saying,
yeah.
there are little bits and pieces that kind of reward you for sticking with the character for so long. And even,
Mm,
for myself to have done, I mean, I don't want to say like shallow research, but with the long, 79-year history of the character, I definitely don't know. I couldn't consider myself like a Hawkman scholar, so to speak. I did some reading up on the character because he was a member of the Justice League and I wanted to know a little bit about him. And he hasn't really
mm,
had his own book for quite a while. Um,
mm.
but even just through doing the research, seeing things pop up like this, I feel rewarded. So I can't imagine how you must feel.
Well, it's been about 5 years since we had a Hawk Band series. One of the reasons I started the whole Hawk World thing was because, Hawk fans didn't have a place to go to read up on Hawkman. So,
Mm.
I started a place where we could all get together and talk about the character and see where he's going to show up next. And, now that the series has started, he's way beyond my expectations. Just and even the slight changes, the wings or the mace or Hawkgirl hasn't even shown up yet. things like that. But still, I think Hawkgirl fans are really wanting her to show up here pretty soon. But for a Hawkman fan, I couldn't really ask for anything more. He's given us a book that we can really enjoy, and I'm almost ready to say this is the best Hawkman series ever.
Wow. That must be a huge compliment on Venditti and Hitch's part, because it's only 5 issues in.
Yeah, there's some that are very special to me, and it's in a way it seems maybe a little bit too premature to say that, but he's just it's just the way and I see the potential and the direction it's going. It's just going to be really something special, and that's why I'm like on Twitter every day and like pick up the book. Gotta pick up the book. It's just so good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because I follow you on Twitter, and I saw that post where you were talking about, or when you were giving like the sales numbers for Hawkman over each issue, and I feel like the fact that like the sales numbers are actually declining a little bit is unnerving. Like, you'll always have those people that just pick up issue 1s to collect them. Or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm always telling people, like, if you want a cool new book and you feel like going on an adventure, Hawkman's great. Like, as you know, I did an interview with Robert Venditti in New York about a month ago, and one of the things that I'd said that I hold very true is that going into this, I was a Robert Venditti fan, and I was just kind of giving the book a chance because I'm a fan of Robert and I think he's a great writer, and I wanted to support him. And like walking, not even walking out of this, only 5 issues in, I'm feeling like a Hawkman fan now. Not only am I a Venditti fan, but I'm a Hawkman fan. So like when you post those really cool snippets of like days in Hawkman's history, or you have your reading list or whatever, I get really interested in checking that stuff out because I feel like there's more I want to read.
Well, yeah, that's what I've been trying to do to get people's interest in the comic, and I'm happy if we have a Hawkman comic. I really don't care if we have a movie or a TV show or whatever. If there's one Hawkman comic a month, I'm happy. But if nobody buys the comic, it's not going to continue. So I've been trying to get it out there and tell everybody how great it is, and to pick it up and to tell their comic book store, their dealer, to, hey, this is a great comic, please, and keep it up and everything. But it's the creators, the writers, and the artists can only do so much. It's up to the fans to keep it going. So
100%.
Do what you got to do. Yeah.
100%. And I can't, honestly, I couldn't suggest this series enough. I mean, I'm having such a good time reading, and I'm not going to lie, going into this conversation, like this Wednesday, for some reason I was really convinced that Hawkman 6 was coming out, but I guess that's next week. And when I realized it didn't come out, I was kind of upset. I was like, man, it's one of those books that like top of the stack every week that it comes, or every month that it comes out. And so, I mean, I think it says a lot, again, as somebody who didn't really go into this book a fan of Hawkman, and like what Venditti is doing here, and like building around I mean, you can probably comment on this in more depth than I can, but it seems like he's building upon everything. Like, it doesn't feel like he's neglecting anything. He's not throwing anything away. He's just changing and morphing and adding on it to make it all feel cohesive.
Well, I was talking with some fans on Facebook a couple weeks ago, and I mentioned that why do people say Hawkman is so confusing? I mean, there are like literally thousands of Green Lanterns. When you say Green Lantern, you got to say which Green Lantern. I picked up the Flash number 50 that came out, I don't know, a month or so ago, and there were like so many Flashes in there, and I haven't really been keeping up with the Flash, so I'm like, what is going on? Who is this? And is this the Barry Allen I know, or is this a new Barry Allen, or what's going on? And it's very confusing. I'm like, what's the difference with Hawkman? And well, what Venditti has done, well, with Green Lantern, it's a force. They're a police force, and there's like thousands of them. And then with the Flash, it's like a legacy. They pass it on. They're the hero. Passes on to the next guy and everything. But with Hawkman, everything that's ever been out with Hawkman is the same guy, is one man. And when you're reading, what Venditti has done is, when you're reading the Hawkman character, the question isn't, okay, who is this? The question is, okay, which Hawkman life am I reading about? But it's still the same Hawkman.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things I used to be annoyed about, but now I'm kind of thankful that when the golden age in the golden age, they had Jay Garrick, Alan Scott, and Carter Hall. And then when the Silver Age started, then we had Hal Jordan, Barry Allen, and Qatar Hall. And I'm like, why? I used to think, why didn't they give him just a completely different name? Because dang, it's so confusing. And it sounds the same, and it kind of adds to confusion. But now I'm kind of like, it's the same guy. We found out the Hawkman on Krypton is what, Qatar All.
Yeah.
Just stuff like that, and it just all connects into the one guy. He's lived all these lives. Maybe some of them are, interact with each other, some before the other, some end before the other, whatever. But everything that's ever happened to Hawkman is in this one character. And that's just an awesome concept and a great idea to work with.
Right. And I found it really cool. I mean, this is I guess a slight spoiler, but I feel like it's more informative than anything of the character. I really like how Venditti had kind of talked about the time scale between all of
Mhm.
his reincarnations throughout time and space. And again, the fact that integrated the fact that he revives himself through time and space. It's not just through time. Um,
Mm.
but the way that they done it, and like how they just they were like, this is non-linear. Him reviving throughout time is non-linear. So even though for example, him being Qatar Hall on Thanagar may exist at a certain time to when we know, because of like the sliding time theories and whatnot. Like he still exists on Earth at the same time, or he can exist somewhere else at the same time. I find it really interesting.
Mm. That's when I talked to Rob back in May, like maybe a couple weeks before the first issue came out, and he said when they decided he was going to do the Hawkman comic, he said he thought about it for about an hour. After an hour, he figured out how he was going to work it. And I'm like, oh, come on, like this one thing has been just confusing everybody for so long. How can you come up with this idea in an hour? But it's so simple and so easy, what he's done, and it makes so much sense. And when you try to piece it all together chronologically, it's just almost impossible.
Yeah.
I've tried to do that. I have a whole, Hawkman flow chart where I post it on Twitter sometimes, but how they all connect and how it came to this and who went where and what and how and all this kind of stuff. But Venditti just completely destroyed my flow chart now. I'm gonna have to come up with a new system, but
Mhm.
it was it's just a way, a kind of Rob made a way for kind of like, I don't know, a ground for Hawk fans to stand on and kind of look out and see everything instead of being confused all the time.
Mhm.
um, that's what a master writer does, and he did it, so kudos
Yeah.
to him.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool too. In light of issue 5, you find out that there's been a reincarnation in the microverse, even
Mm-hmm.
like
Right.
the world building. It just feels so incredibly like interesting. Like when they revealed
Mm,
that, like that's just not something you would think of. When they say time and space, you literally
mm,
think of outer space, but space isn't just
mm,
indicative of that. It's layers and
mm,
layers, like throughout even our own reality. So, like when they had
mm,
brought up having like there being a reincarnation in the microverse, like mind blown.
mm. Well, that's another thing. What happened there? Because up until that point, he had been slipping back into time. He was going back to Egypt and going back to Thanagar and everything, and then, but then this time he didn't go back in time. He went through space or into microspace.
Hmm.
And I thought that was really interesting because, okay, we're not just going to be, moving back and forth in time. We're going to be going to like different locations in the
Hmm.
present time as well. And where Ray Palmer and Carter Hall, they're talking, is like, you came here not to meet your former life, but to pick up something that you left behind. And I thought that was really interesting. Another interesting angle that he came up with. We're I guess he didn't want us to get too complacent, okay, which timeline are we in now, but suddenly we're in a completely different scenarios. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the and also too, I feel like it's revolutionary in the sense of like the way Robert Venditti has now conceptualized like the flowing of time in the DC universe, because it's not
Mm,
exclusive to just Hawkman, it's exclusive
mm,
to the universe. And the way
mm,
in issue 5 that he more describes it as is just like an ocean. And every time it's like you're skipping a stone across the ocean, and every time like Carter Hall being the stone or his consciousness, and every time he skips, he leaves a part of his consciousness behind.
mm,
Because for hardcore DC fans, you guys know, that hyper time exists, and that everything that
mm,
ever happened still exists. And even though it would be considered in the past, it's going on at the same time as the present. And it sounds really weird and it sounds really convoluted, but that is the
mm,
only way to even conceptualize what's going on here. And,
mm,
and that's incredibly present. And again, like Tim was saying earlier, um it's really interesting how like he's gonna kind of have to go through time and space to recollect the pieces of himself, and
mm,
wherever that'll lead him, is going to be such a cool journey, because there are going to be the more conventional places like Thanagar and Egypt and Earth, or Egypt was Earth, but like again more in the present Earth. But now we have
mm.
Krypton, we have the microverse, we have Ran. Like it's just, I feel like the journey to where we're going is going to be such a fun ride.
Well, it's just the potential is just, limitless, really. I mean, somebody was saying Hawkman probably was an Atlantean at one point. So maybe we might be going down to Atlantis sometime,
Yeah.
or maybe he was uh what's Sinestro's home planet?
Oh,
Can't remember the name. Kruger,
uh,
Kruger or something.
Korrigar, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe he, lived there, and just all these different places that he could be on and show up on and have a connection and everything. And it's so much fun and so much potential. And I'm sure Rob's having a blast writing it because uh, Hawkman is one of the most just limitless potential characters out there.
Yeah. And what's cool is for, even for me, and I'd like you to comment, you must be really excited to the fact that they brought the Ray Palmer Carter Hall relationship back. I mean, those two, I feel like they're often overlooked, but they are like one of the greatest pairs in the DC universe. People talk about it and they say, okay, you're going to have um Oliver Queen and Hal Jordan, or Bruce Wayne Clark Kent, but I feel like Ray Palmer and Carter Hall are two to be up there as well.
Mm. Well, when I found out that Adam was going to show up in issue 5, I went back and wrote a whole history of their relationship back from when they first met in 1962. It's on my blog, but They've been through a lot, and there's an issue about the Atom, maybe almost about 8 years ago now, where Ray Palmer had an older brother who was a fireman who died, and Carter Hall kind of takes his brother's place.
Mm.
And in the issue, Ray Palmer is saying, Carter Hall is kind of brash sometimes, and kind of hard headed, and goes in without thinking sometimes, stuff like that. But all those qualities reminds Ray Palmer of his older brother that passed away. So they've got almost like a brother relationship going, and it's a really special relationship. And the first page of issue 5, where they're giving each other a hug, and that look on Carter Hall's face, it's just like, you can't help but smile when you see that. Just the relief and the joy that he has of seeing his friend after so many years again. And I know Ray, the Atom's going to be in issue number 6, and after that we don't know, but I sure hope he shows up again, because those two are great together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool, like how their relationship is playing off of each other and how that is progressing the plot of the story going forward. One of the things too, like kind of like touching back a little bit on the way they're reincarnating, it's going to sound confusing to those listening, and I hope I can articulate myself in a way that it's a little bit less so. But I think it's really cool about how the way they describe time being more like an ocean, right? And it's centralized. If you think about Carter and the way he's reincarnating, through Krypton, through Thanagar, through Egypt, Ran, the microverse, so on and so forth, that he doesn't reincarnate linearly. So first of all, like for example, we don't know who the first Hawkman is, like who he was, like his first ever consciousness was. So his first consciousness could have been way in the future. And then when he reincarnated, he could have been brought back to Egypt. And then when he reincarnated again to Thanagar, and then back to Earth, and then wherever. Like, you know what I mean? When most people think about it, they're like, okay, Prince Khufu had to have been his first reincarnation. Or maybe Thanagar, and then Egypt, and then, but it's not linear. So even though they all exist at different times, when he reincarnates, his next reincarnation isn't going to be, if he dies in 2018, it's not going to be 2019 necessarily. He can reincarnate back in time, and that in turn alters the timeline. So, like,
well, time is relative, right? Because the way time moves on Earth is going to be different the way time moves on another area of space. Like Tony Isabella came up with a theory that the average lifespan of a Thanagarian is 300 years. And maybe that has something to do with the heavier gravity, or from the planet, or whatever. So it's very possible that while he was living on this one planet for 300 years, over here he had this very short, from the viewpoint of Earth, maybe it only lasted a few hours even. Right. And in that way, it kind of overlaps, and one jumps ahead of the other, but they're all existing at the same quote unquote time, I guess, because of that ocean theory. And that's very interesting to me. How he's going to work with that angle is going to be amazing to see. I hope it doesn't get to be too confusing and overlapping and everything. One Hawkman at a time is probably enough, but working that all in together to explain his past lives is very interesting.
Yeah. And so another question I'd have for you as the Hawkman expert in this conversation is for me, when I'm reading a comic book or I'm reading anything where I have an understanding of a character going into it, is dialogue. Dialogue, I feel, is very important because it's very indicative to the nature of the character. In this run, do you feel like the way Venditti writes Carter Hall's dialogue? Does it feel appropriate, or again, is it one of those things that feels different but kind of welcome?
Different but welcome.
Okay.
I really enjoyed the Jeff Johns series, but I think the more the series went on, he became more of a kind of a brute, headstrong, not that intelligent kind of character.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of that, a lot of maybe the fans that came on during that time kind of look at him that way. But in this new series, we see a guy who's very humble. He's not interested in, money or anything like that. He just loves exploring and discovering. And he's not the guy who throws the first punch.
Mm.
That's one thing that kind of annoyed me in the past in some of like Justice League or issues or whatever, is whether it's Black Adam or Superman or whoever who's going to knock the tar out of him, Hawkman goes charging in anyway and gets the tar knocked out of him, and it's just like, well, he's smarter than that, I mean, he knows he's going to get, beaten to a pulp. Why does he, why does he do that? He doesn't have the power to face up to these, powerhouses. So Venditti also, when he was explaining the character, is like this Hawkman is a character who doesn't throw the first punch, but he's going to throw the last punch.
Right.
And that in the very first issue, where the Wingor, the gorilla statue, is coming after him, he doesn't want to destroy the statue. It's history, and Carter Hall loves history and wants to preserve it. But the thing just kept coming after him and coming after him. And even when he flew up into the sky, the gorilla sprouts wings and it starts flying after him. And finally, Carter Hall's like, enough. And he turns around, wham, one blow, and that was it. Like, oh, this is what, Rob was talking about. He's not gonna fight unless he absolutely has to. But when he does, watch out.
Right. Yeah.
I enjoyed that aspect of him very much.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely endearing as a new fan going into this. Like if Carter Hall, I feel like maybe if I were to have read the Jeff Johns Hawkman before I would have read this, my perception of the character would have been totally different. But for me, this incarnation via Venditti feels, I mean, I've said welcoming, but it's kind of endearing. You know what I mean? Like, you care about Carter Hall, you care about his plight to preserve history, and that's one thing that I like too, because I know Robert Venditti is a history buff, and obviously Hawkman is drenched in history, both literally and figuratively. He reincarnates throughout time, and so I think it's really interesting here that another one of the themes that he touches on is the preservation of history and how valuable it is. And I feel like one of the things that kind of centralize that and make that a little bit more accented is Hawkman really shouldn't have to care, because he reincarnates so many times it would be easy enough just to let it go and live in the present and live his current life. But his entire quest here is to go back and recover parts of himself so that it informs the future. The saying that history doesn't just come once. And I feel like here in this series, it's really embodied by the way Venditti is writing it.
Well, I think Carter Hall's kind of a sentimental kind of guy, and he's lived through all these lives and he's seen all these things. He's saw the pyramids built probably, and just all these things. And I think a lot of the things in history have a special sentimental value to him. And in this present time, he wants to preserve it. He wants to keep it going in some way. Maybe that kind of ties him to, or reminds him of as a past life or something. I don't know, but everything around him has some kind of value, and he's not one to destroy things and just tear them down just for the sake of tearing it down.
Right.
He wants to preserve it, and that makes the character much more interesting to me.
Right. Not only interesting, endearing, a lot more
Yeah,
relatable, I feel.
very. Mm,
Yeah, I mean, it just feels I love the fact again that it feels like there's a lot of history behind it, but it also feels welcoming. Like it feels like it's ready to put that history in your face and make you aware of it, but also teach you about it, you know.
mm.
And
Well, you see, he's had a hand in history. He goes to that museum in London and he meets his curator, and the guy says, "I'd love to shake the hand of the guy who donated this 100 years ago." And
yeah,
he's shaking the hand of the guy who donated it to him. So that particular piece in the museum had special meaning for Carter, and so those little things that Rob kind of throws in there are a lot of fun.
right, yeah. And again, something too I just thought of, like as you were talking, is I've talked about how he's both trying to discover himself. I feel like like everything just clicked about like the emphasis of him as a discoverer and an explorer, because he's not only trying to explore the world and preserve the world, he's exploring himself. Like I feel like the way that I feel like I had talked about them up until literally just now, I had kind of talked about him finding himself and being an explorer of the world, but they're so interconnected. It's so
Mm,
indicative to him overall, because again, he's exploring both himself and his past and the world. They're not
mm,
two mutually exclusive things. And for
mm.
me, like that just made me even more interested about what's going on here.
Yeah, well, it's Carter Hall is not just one of his just a life he leads to hide who he really is. Carter Hall is who he is, and whether he's Hawkman or Carter Hall, they're one and the same, and both is interesting. Um, I thought it was interesting how he keeps a journal. And at the end of the Metal series, well, all through the Metal series, we're reading Carter Hall's journal and what he wrote down and everything.
Mhm.
And then at the end of the Metal series, you know, um, Kendra's saying, before he finally fell asleep, just collapsed and fell asleep, he just wrote everything that he could think of in his journal before he fell asleep. And I think that, he does that because he's realized he's forgetting a lot of his past,
Mhm.
and he's trying to keep a record of that. Like he's on that dinosaur island, and he's sitting by his fire and writing in his journal and everything because he doesn't want to forget. And I think that that journal part of Carter Hall is also very interesting, and how he tries to keep a part of him in that journal.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really, really cool. I mean, it just gives way to a lot of the potential that that Venditti has to do both narratively and with a character.
Hmm.
One of the questions too, because I imagine there's always going to be someone watching this who doesn't really know, you know, a lot about Hawkman and about how he um what's not revives, but he reincarnates throughout these
Mm.
different spaces and time. To you, for example, I know that Qatar Hall of Thanagar is one of the more well-known incarnations of Hawkman. How would you say Qatar Hall of Thanagar and him as Qatar, or I'm sorry, Qatar Hall and Carter Hall of Earth, would you feel that they are both similar and different from each other?
Hmm. Oh, interesting.
Because
Well,
I
the
feel like from what I've seen here, Qatar Hall seems to be a lot more brash, a lot more like that savage Hawkman you were talking about before.
hmm. Well, the guitar hall that we saw in issue number 4, um, the guitar hall in the Hawkworld series was usually a pretty level-headed guy, and Hawk Woman was the one who was usually the hothead, and he was usually talking her down.
Wow.
But then in this issue number 4, he saw Bison. That's the guy who caused him to kill his own father, and he lost all his rationale, and choom, 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 trying to shoot Carter Hall out of the sky.
Which was a really,
But
really fun thing to watch, by the way.
that that I don't think that was a very angry Qatar Hall, but I don't think that was the real Qatar Hall. He's a guy who studies, who as same as Carter Hall, loves archaeology and history, and has a very deep sense of understanding why he does what he does, Cher, a Thal Hawkwoman, was more of the one that just kind of just shoots away and asks questions later. So in that respect, they're kind of similar. When they, back in was it 1994, during the Zero Time and Crisis, when they were merged, Qatar Hall, it was Qatar Hall's body, and but he took on the, I guess, attributes of Carter Hall as well as the Hawk God. But that eventually, drove him mad, and they had to send him into the Hawk realm. But then in the Justice Society JSA series, when they brought him back, it kind of reversed, and this time it was Carter Hall's body with some of the Qatar Hall traits. But he had Qatar Hall's memories, and I thought it was interesting how they kind of flipped it and it reversed and everything. But they're both, to me, almost just one and the same. They're the same guy who just happened to live in a different time and a different place. But I think they have a lot of the same attributes.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting hearing you talking about that, because again, as someone with not a crazy amount of background knowledge with the character, it's really easy to be like, why is this guy 2 different characters? But just for the sake of the fact that they have two different names. I mean, and something too, I want to ask, if you could say something to somebody who wants to get into Hawkman, but is kind of afraid or intimidated, what would you say to them?
Well, for me, Hawkman is mostly 4 things. The first 2, Rob Venditti has brought up in the series, exploring and discovering. And here in this series, we get to see a superhero who's on a quest, and he's going to explore and he's going to discover things, and a very Indiana Jones vibe to it. And that's always fun. It's fun to watch.
Yeah.
The other 2, for me, Hawkman is all about flight. That's the number one thing that got me interested in Hawkman in the first place, is when I first saw a Justice League picture of all the superheroes coming out of the Hall of Justice, and I saw Hawkman with his wings and his winged helmet and his harness, and he flies. And to me, it's a superhero's got to fly. That's just one of the criteria for me. And this is, and Gardner Fox, who created Hawkman, has also said that when he created Hawkman, there was a Superman who was really strong. There was a Flash who had super speed. And at that time, there wasn't really a hero who flew. Superman didn't fly until like 1941 or something like that.
Yeah.
And Hawkman was really the first true DC superhero that could fly. And for me, I've always enjoyed seeing Hawkman in flight. And in my opinion, he's the number 1 aerial combat fighter of anybody in the DC universe. He's got so much experience, and he knows how to fly.
Yeah, he literally has
And
generations of experience.
yeah, exactly. And Venditti has also mentioned that as well. You know, Hawkman is all about flight. On the very first page of the first issue, he says, you know, I am made to soar, you know. And, you know, I read that page and was like, yes, okay, this is Hawkman. This is my Hawkman. And also the number 4 thing is, to me, Hawkman represents order. And it's kind of funny way thing to say for a character that's so confusing and so all over the place.
Right.
But I think Hawkman is always a character who wants to put things into order. That's kind of his. He wants to find out the answers and know what this is all about, and he put it in its rightful place, I guess you could say. To me, when I see Hawkman, I see a person who has a very devoted, disciplined life in doing what he does. So when somebody asks me, you know, what do I like Hawkman? Why should I read a Hawkman comic? Is just a superhero who flies and explores, you know, and that's what it's all about, really. Everything else is kind of extra for me. Just seeing the, you know, Hawkman on the comic book pages flying and you know, fighting the bad guys and overcoming all odds and coming out on top each time is the thrill for me.
And two, on what you were saying, it feels almost intuitive that, you know, for a character with so much disorder in his history and in his life, the one thing he's searching for is order. Like that is his purpose, to uncover the history and provide order to such a chaotic, you know, life and history.
Right.
Which you know, it just makes so much sense. And I love too, I never really thought about that because I know that Golden Age Superman couldn't fly, and it was actually the radio show, the radio series in the 40s that introduced flight to Superman.
Right.
And I never put that together until you brought that up. I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Because it, you know, I feel like in pop culture, you know, you think flying superhero, you think Superman, right? It's a bird, it's a plane,
Right.
it's Superman. And when people look into comic books and they might see Hawkman, they might think, well, wow, he can fly, whatever. But that just clicked something. Like they don't realize, and again, it took me until just now to realize, like, but he was the flying superhero. He was the original before Superman did it. Which,
Well, in the very first issue of Flash Comics #1, you know, back in, you know, in the Superman, I guess, what was it, TV show or radio show? I can't remember. It's like, look up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman.
right, the
Well,
radio show.
in the very first issue of Flash Comics, when Hawkman puts on his outfit for the first time and is flying over the city, people are like, look, you know, a hawk, you know, a giant hawk, you know. And I think maybe that's where that came from. I don't know, but you know, look up in the sky, there's Hawkman. He represents the flying superhero to me.
Right. Do you think too, something I was just thinking about, do you think that there is a metaphor for his flight and kind of the ever consistent, or like the ever pertinent need for us to ascend in knowledge, you know, because he's an explorer, you know?
That's deep.
Yeah, I know it's pretty deep, but I feel like that's something that Robert Venditti would allude to, hardcore.
Well, you know, but Hawkman is not only a, you know, character that, you know, flies. He also goes underground quite a bit. You know, he's an archaeologist, and so he's, you know, flying up, but he's also going down. And I guess you could say that in a way that he's, flying towards his, destination, or flying to find his, whatever he's looking for. But he's also digging deep inside,
Right.
and going underground. I mean, he's a guy who's, I was made to soar, but he's made the decision, or he's made the choice to go underground where he can't spread his wings, which is a very interesting contrast to me. And
Right.
Venditti has also brought it up in his a lot of his interviews as well, and that contrast is one of the things that makes Carter Hall and Hawkman very interesting.
Right. Because in hindsight, when digging under the ground, he should feel most vulnerable, but that's where he
Right,
chooses to be. That's
but
a,
he goes there anyway because he's gotta know. He wants to know. He's an explorer.
right. Maybe that's probably even more indicative than what I was saying. That makes a lot more sense. The metaphor isn't that he's kind of, ascending towards knowledge. It's that he's not afraid to do the things that would make him most vulnerable in order
Mhm.
to attain that knowledge.
Mm,
That makes a,
right. He
a lot
doesn't.
more sense.
Yeah, he doesn't shun away from it. He's down there in that cave with that stone, monkey attacking him, and
Right.
I'm sure that's not where he wants to be. And
Right.
he was attacking. He
Right.
was
He even
fighting
says that he
T
can't really spread his
Rex.
wings very well.
Right, he was fighting that T Rex, and he's like, "Can we go up in the sky where I can use my wings?" Oh no, okay, all right, we'll just fight here then.
Right. And
You
and
know,
again,
and
it's almost like something under his belt too, because he just cracks the T-Rex in the face with his mace, without his wings, without anything. I think it's a testament to how powerful he is.
mm. Well, the power levels of Hawkman, I'm not really sure about. We just saw him knock the crap out of a planet last issue. We'll see what happens next issue, but I think his power levels are not quite. We don't know about as that much yet either. Especially if Venditti brings out that Claw of Horus that he has. If that thing comes out, then I guess we might see really how powerful he is.
Now, what is that? What is the Claw of Horus?
Okay, Claw of Horus came out in the JSA series back in 2001, and it was made out of nth metal. Prince Khufu had it made out of nth metal back in the day, and it's this kind of glove gauntlet thing that Hawkman. It hasn't been used that many times, but what he does is it pulls on the gravitational force of a planet, and he can pretty much, knock Superman out with it.
That's
If
nuts.
Yes, and he actually has in the Superman Batman series. It's also on YouTube. If you put in Superman Batman versus Captain Marvel Hawkman, you'll get the little episode where Hawkman or Superman grabs Hawkman, and he's taking him up into the stratosphere to make him pass out. And Hawkman's like, "No, I don't think so." And that Claw of Horus comes up, and wham, he just knocks the crap out of Superman.
Wow.
And Hawkgirl has also used it once during the series about 10 years ago as well. It gave her kind of a long range blast of something. It's never really been explained. I wrote an article about the Claw of Horus on my blog as well. Just everything I could find about it, I wrote about it. But it's one of his most powerful weapons, and I have my own personal theory about that. That mace that he's using right now.
Right. Yeah.
It's like a lightsaber mace. It's like a rod on his belt, and then when he grabs it, vroom, the mace shows up. But I'm wondering if that thing will turn into the Claw of Horus as well.
Yeah. I mean, the one of the things too to comment on is in this run, he's kind of he's kind of given the mace almost like properties of Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. Like, has it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it had ever been done where, like, if he were to throw the
No.
mace, he can retrieve it just by kind of mentally commanding it to.
No, it's never happened before, but it makes complete sense because he's up in the sky and he throws it one time and that's it. You know,
Yeah.
he's got to go fly back down and pick it up. Wait a minute, wait just a second. Let me go pick up my mace. You know, and to be honest, I always wish that had happened. And like, you know, he doesn't really have a long range weapon until now,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and he's up in the sky with his mace and everything, and when that thing came flying back to him in issue number 3, I was like, yes. But at the same time, I was like, oh man, what is everybody's response going to be to this? Or they're like, oh, he's just ripping off, you know, Mjolnir, and you know, it's just that's you know, it's. I thought everybody kind of be down on it, but it was a very enthusiastic response, and kind of everybody had the same reaction I did. It was like, yes, finally, this this makes complete sense for Hawkman. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was a very, very welcome revelation. Yeah,
I
new
think
mace.
it's also cool because it ties into I mean, you know, Scott Snyder addressed it and they've been going further into detail about like the properties of nth metal and how vast and wide it can be, but they've given it a bit of context. And I think it's really cool because most people would be like, well, it's just a metal mace. It's like, no, it's not just a metal mace, it's nth metal. Like in nth
Mm-hmm.
metal, it kind of like inside nth metal is almost like the creative lifeblood of the universe. So there's almost
Mm-hmm.
anything that can be done with it. So I feel like I really hope we get a little bit more of that in this
Mm-hmm.
run. You know that because he'd even kind of poked a little jab at it in the 5th issue when he takes down like the manifestation of the planet and like he's in the dust and he's like, well, that's nth metal for you. Um, I hope Venditti plays with that. I hope we really go into a little bit more like what the nth metal is capable of. Hopefully, get the Claw of Horus because that sounds really cool, and I'd love to. Um, but I don't know about you, but I feel like that would be a really fun exploration for Venditti to look into as well.
Well, I'm sure he's read about it. I'll send you the link to my article on it later, but it's a very
Yeah.
interesting weapon that he has. But I've also read that the nth metal kind of works different for whoever's wearing it. So
Mhm.
not it doesn't work the same for everybody.
Right.
So and kind of like I think that's what they're doing right now with Hawk Girl and Hawkman, because if when you look at Hawk Girl in the Justice League series by Scott Snyder, she's got like metal wings coming out of her back, and she knocked the crap out of Martian Manhunter last issue, and she's
Right.
pretty powerful in her own right, but she seems to have a different set of abilities than Carter Hall in the Hawkman series, which is very interesting, and I like that change. I don't like, well, you know, it's okay that they're, you know, but you know, male female versions of each other, but then here they have just completely different Hawk heroes with their own set of powers, and I think that's really interesting and lots of fun. I hope they work with that.
Yeah, it provides a level of individualism because even
Hmm.
you know me growing up, I was born in the 90s, so I grew up with that Justice League animated series, and for me, I met Hawkgirl before I met Hawkman. And so when I
Mm.
saw Hawkman, I was like, oh, they're just like the same thing, just one, they have different genitalia. And so
Hmm.
I agree with you from what I'm seeing here and from what I'm seeing in Justice League between the two seeing and I think it provides this level of individualism to the characters and make them feel, you know, that they can survive on their own, that they don't need to be with one another. And you know, not to say that them being together isn't great, but it gives them a
Hmm.
little bit more merit to
Mm.
do whatever, really.
Mm. Well, I really hope, you know, Scott Snyder. Every time he answers one question, he gives us 10 more questions that we're, you
Right.
know, we're wondering about, and I really hope he addresses Hawk Girl, and even if it's just like a 6-issue miniseries or something, I would love to see a Hawk Girl series, and without Hawkman and her discovering her own past, and you know what was her connection with the Blackhawks, and how did she end up as the leader, and what's all with that? And, just I have so many questions about Hawk Girl as well. And she is no sidekick. She is her own, you know, hero, and she has her own abilities. And in some areas, she, has a lot more expertise in some areas than Hawkman. They
Mhm.
have their own set of, abilities, and I really hope they go with that. I don't want her to end up being just like a supporting character in a Hawkman story. I would love to see them back together, but as equals,
I mean,
definitely.
I'm sure we'll see that at some point in this Hawkman run. I just feel like, if this is in fact kind of taking place around the same time as Snyder's Justice League, I imagine she might even be a little bit busier than Carter is.
Yeah. Well, what is it, next issue or something? Justice League. They're on their way to Thanagar now.
Mhm.
So and there's a whole thing going on there. So we might get some more answers about Nth Metal and Thanagar and Hawk Girl and Hawkman there. But um, yeah, with Scott Snyder's, he's very good at, leaving you with so many questions, but he doesn't always give you the answers. He lets you kind of, work out your own answers. But I would like some answers sometimes. That would be nice to find out what's going on with Hawk Girl.
Yeah. I mean, I hope we get it too. Like I said, I actually was exposed to Hawkgirl before I was exposed to Hawkman via the Justice League animated series. So she's always kind of like when Snyder had announced that the basis for his team is going to be the Justice League animated series group. I was through the roof about it, Hawkgirl included. So
Mhm.
I'm sure it seems like from what he said in interviews and from a conversation I had with him, he's looking to expand a little bit on every character, but he's doing it kind of an arc at a time.
Mm. Um, yeah, well, I guess right now where it's what Aquaman's turn,
Yeah,
but
a little bit of Wonder
yeah,
Woman too.
yeah. But uh, yeah, I'm sure eventually he'll, get around to it. I wasn't a big fan of the animation series back then because for Hot Girl it was great. I wasn't all that excited about her hooking up with Jon Stewart.
Mm,
It was okay, but then when they brought out Carter Hall and he ended up being kind of a stalker kind of guy, that's when I stopped watching because that's not the Hawkman that I know, and but that's the Hawkman that a lot of people grew up with, unfortunately, and I was kind of disappointed in that series.
yeah.
It was great for Hot Girl though. It was a very good series for Hot Girl.
Yeah, I mean that honestly, like that was my impression of Hawkman. I was like, I don't care about Hawkman. Like he like that show though. I mean, and again, maybe it's more of a positive thing because it gives Hawkgirl a little bit better of a reputation than she probably would have had in the public eye. Um,
Yeah.
just because going into that, I'm like, oh, like she is this badass woman, and even though it's not accurate to the comics to the point where she's the more dominant Hawk person, it at least will
Mhm.
bolster people's opinion of her and get people
Mm,
excited about her, and then maybe read the comics and get into it and really find out who Carter Hall Hawkman is.
mm. Well, they could have done that without the expense of Carter Hall.
Yeah.
They could have worked that a little bit better, but that's that, and we got a new series, and hopefully both Hawkman fans and Hawkgirl fans are happy with the way things are going right now.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, again, this series is so good, and I've, throughout this conversation, we haven't really given a lot of the plot, just an idea of the character and how Robert Venditti's kind of informing who he is and whatnot. But it's not only is it just like a great read and a great piece of literature to get through, it's a fun book. Every,
Mm,
every adventure that we go on, like Tim had alluded to before, we get to see his old incarnations and he fights his own incarnations. We're discovering, we're on the road to discovering who the first incarnation ever was.
mm.
And there's so much to it. And it's such a good time. So if you guys watching are not reading Hawkman, I can't stress it enough. This is honestly one of the most consistent comic books coming out right now, and I read a lot. Marvel, DC, Indie. I love this book. It's really good. And honestly, there's a reason that I'm literally devoting an entire episode of Let's Talk Comics to talk this run. Um, so for just to kind of summarize everything that we've talked about and bring things to a bit of a close, for you as an old school fan and as the leading Hawkman expert of the world, what do you think the
Love
biggest
that.
strengths to this series are?
Uh, well, you can't go past just Venditti's writing. Um, he's made Carter Hall a relatable character, a character that you can sympathize with, and you want to find out, where he's going and what he's going to find out. And then the art by Bryan Hitch has just been incredible. You can't put it down after one reading. It's just you read it and then you go back and just soak in each panel. It's just every 2-page spread. It's just almost every page is frameable,
Yeah.
and it's a beautiful comic to look at. It's a fun comic to read, and I think anybody who picks it up could have a good time with it.
Yeah, I agree. And from my angle, coming from the perspective as a newer reader, I can't echo Tim's sentiments anymore, in greater detail. The story feels so inviting to someone who doesn't have a lot of exposure, but at the same time, it starts to reward you in bits for reading and discovering the character. And
Mm,
again, Venditti does a great job at just not spilling the beans from the get-go.
mm,
He's kind of
mm,
giving you a little bit to bite on as every issue goes forward, and it's
mm,
really really thought provoking, which I think is
mm,
great. When a
mm,
piece of artwork is thought provoking, I feel like that's when it really does its job. It's great at
mm,
succeeding and making a fun story and making it adventurous, which this also incorporates. It provokes
mm,
a lot of thought. It gets you
mm,
really thinking. It's like, okay, well, if this happened, then how does this make sense? Or, you know, this is interesting. I never thought about that. And
mm,
again, just the way that the collaboration goes on between the creative team of writer Robert Venditti and the artist Bryan Hitch, just it really really is the pinnacle of comic book storytelling. They find a great way to
mm,
collaborate and direct each scene and
mm,
to emphasize who the character is and what their history is and what they're trying to do. So, again, if you guys aren't reading Hawkman, you should definitely be checking it out. And if you guys aren't already, make sure you go follow Tim on social media. Again, link below to his Twitter and to his blog. I've been following him on Twitter for a couple months, and that's how I was fortunate enough to get in touch with this great gentleman to get this all in motion. So, Tim, thank you so much for coming on and chatting Hawkman. I know I'm not a super big Hawkman veteran, so I know it can sometimes potentially get frustrating, um, having a
no, not
conversation
at
like that. But
Uh, yeah, I can talk Hawkman 24/7. So I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate the chance to talk about the new series and maybe help get more people interested in picking up the book. So if you're not picking it up, give it a try. I don't think you'll be disappointed.
yeah, 100% agree. So again, three things to take away from this, guys. Make sure you're reading Hawkman. Make sure you're following Tim on both Twitter and his blog and Instagram. The Twitter and the blog are in the description down below. I'll throw an Instagram link too once we get off live. And then again, check me out. Follow me, subscribe to the channel for more. Make sure you like this video to let me know that you dug it and you were interested in the conversation. I'm really hoping to get into works doing a Hawkman video like 4 New Readers series, and Tim and I have been communicating about that for a little bit. So hopefully we'll be able to put that together. But again, thank you, Tim, for coming on. It's been a blast talking comic books and Hawkman with you.
Thanks,
And
Trevor. I had a lot of fun.
My pleasure. And thank you everyone for watching. This is Dark Knight Nation and Tim from Hawkworld signing out.